6:30. Are we recording? Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to the special meeting of the Blue Lake City Council. It's Tuesday, November 12th, 2024. I'll call this meeting to order. Please join us in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Could you establish a quorum of the council, please? Mayor Jones? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Scholl? Present. Councilmember Geyer?
Present. Thank you.
Councilmember Stefani?
Here.
Councilmember Edgar?
Here.
I can't hear you guys. Zoom cannot hear you.
Thank you. We are now on item 3, approval of the agenda. I'll check with the city council persons first. Is there anyone that would like to move anything around or change anything on the agenda? No. I'll open it up to public. Is there anyone in the public that would like to move anything around in the agenda for this evening? Okay, back to council for a possible vote.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second. Motion made by Christopher Edgar, seconded by Angela Shull to approve the agenda as delivered. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We have an agenda. Item 4 is our public comment time. The public is invited to present petitions, make announcements, or provide other information to the City Council that is relevant to the scope of authority of the City of Blue Lake that is not on the agenda. The Council may provide up to 15 minutes for this public input session. To assure that each individual presentation is heard, the Council may uniformly impose a time limitation of 3 minutes to each individual presentation. The public will be given the opportunity to address items that are on the agenda at the time the Council takes up each specific agenda item. Is there anyone here for public comment? Okay, we'll start with Scott. See anyone else? Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mayor Jones, members of the council. I'd like to request a public hearing or workshop at your very next meeting to discuss the proposal for an RV park and the planning and grant expenditures for that plan to repurpose the property at the Cogen plant. It seems that there's other items on your agenda that make this request urgent, which is why I believe you should do this at your very next meeting. My memory serves that over $230,000 were spent with consultants to prepare a conceptual plan, but I don't think we've had any report back on what the net result was of all the good staff work that went into that effort. So it seems before you make any other commitments for use of that property, we should hear about the plan for the RV park. I'd like to have a written response, please, if that's possible.
I see a hand on Zoom. Julie Christie.
This is Julie Christie. I can hear you guys really great tonight. I'm sorry we couldn't hear you in the beginning. Are you able to hear me? Okay.
Yes. Yes, we can hear you,
Okay.
Julie. Go ahead.
Thank you. I want to thank Justin. I reached out to him about some better headphones and he gave me a great recommendation, but I'm still on my old Happy Barn ones right now, so I'm sorry. I'd like to just bring up another thing with changing Annie and Mary Day's date, the chamber. I think that was awesome. I think that's gonna really be productive for our city, to not have any conflicting other stuff going on. I think our next Annie and Mary Day can be really, really fun. I think if we can just pull together in as many ways as possible to make that happen. I do see people asking about the car show. I think maybe just giving some clarification out to the public that the car show will still, if whatever status that is. But I do see that some people aren't, they really support that. Um, I would like to say with the bike park right on our community, jumping in there, I am kind of worried about liability. insurance, I think that's a discussion we should have. Does this need to be a private club for that part of insurance? The truck route, I did make a call into the county, the other week about the exiting of Greenwood. And I am kind of concerned with the drainage and everything that's happening there. Obviously, this project has been slow going, and I still am very concerned about it being safe for our city. There is a bulb out on the exiting side that is prohibiting the trucks from exiting town. And I mean, they're basically just, and as a parent, I knew I wasn't going to be able to park there anymore and open my door. And that is, that is what's happening. So I just feel like there's a lot of revision and planning. So I do appreciate my prior speaker. Anytime we can coordinate any kind of town hall, community access to discuss the future of this town, prioritize on it, and it will make these meetings more simple and productive. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on a non-agenda item? All right, we'll move on then to item 5. Receive presentation from Power Transitions regarding potential development of a portion of the former Blue Lake Power Site for battery storage. Discussion item. Did you want to start, Mandy, or do you want to? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. My pleasure. We could get started. Um, well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. I've been in the city quite a bit over the last several months. Oh, Jeff Goldstein. I'm sorry. Jeff Goldstein. I live in Berkeley, California here. I have family that lived in Blue Lake at Jackson Hill Ranch, and I also come up here all the time because I do have family up here. Um, and it's an interesting story how I became familiar with the Blue Lake Power Plant. So I think it's very relevant. So I used to go visit my niece and my nephew who lived up on Jackson Hill, and every time I went by, I saw the smoke coming out of the stack, and I said, this just doesn't look right in this beautiful valley. And so I said, what's happening with this plant? And they said, well, interestingly enough, we understand it's being shut down, and new purpose and repurposing of the site is going to occur. So just at some point in time, Jeff, when you're in a position of doing something positive for the community, why don't you just get in touch with the right people, and we'll let you know who the right people are. So that's where I met Mandy. It's a pleasure to be here, meeting the city council as well as the community. It's a large turnout. It's very encouraging. I've not been to very many community meetings where there's been this much turnout. So this is very encouraging. Um, and I work for a company by the name of Bechtel. I don't know if anybody's heard of it. It's a large engineering construction company. I worked for them for 35 years, and I retired from them. I thought it was going to be a real retirement, but it ended up not being a real retirement. I think a lot of us end up learning that we don't really retire even after we retire. In Bechtel, I was responsible for a lot of positions, but I was mainly in the power company and the development and financing company of projects. In the engineering construction side, I was in power and civil, I should say. And on the power side, I was involved in thermal power plants, but also on the renewable side. So over my career, I developed a lot of solar projects, battery projects, wind projects, offshore wind projects. So I am familiar with what's going on here with the offshore wind. And other types of energy facilities, including hydro and so forth. But I was not only on the engineering construction side, I was also responsible for the development, the financing, and the execution of the project, including its construction and its early operation. That was an exciting part of my career. But after that, when I retired, I was asked by a friend that GE was buying a company and they needed somebody to put together a risk management program. And the risk management program was focused on ensuring quality performance and environmental safety. And so I credit myself to being very environmentally conscious
and I believe that this is a motivating factor in my interest in the Blue Lake Power Facility and what we're planning on doing with it if this does go ahead. Now I work for a company by the name of Power Transitions. I worked for the CEO of that company previously, and that company was formed about 2 years ago. Some folks have asked questions, when was it formed? It was formed by a company called NCAP, and we'll get into a little bit more about them. But they're a very large venture capital company that actually has been forming environmentally conscious projects and companies for the last 10 or 20 years. So I'll get into that in a little more detail. I'm on page 3. So our mission as a company, and the reason we were established, was to acquire, retire, or retiring power plants. And our intent is to take power plants that are polluters, that are at the end of their life, that are no longer fruitful to the benefit of society, and actually acquire those power plants, or lease the land in which the power plants are on, and demolish those power plants, remediate the sites, and repurpose the sites for a good, useful, environmentally conscious purpose, such as solar, such as battery energy storage, wind, and other purposes. But always keeping our mind on renewable energy. The intent, of course, is to restore the site, restore tax revenue. A lot of these plants that we're acquiring or releasing the land and taking on the responsibility environmentally associated with the existing plant have lost their tax basis because the plants are shut down. So obviously we're restoring the tax basis. We're cleaning up the site, and we can get into a little bit more about that later. And we're creating jobs. Admittedly, battery storage doesn't create a lot of jobs. It creates jobs during construction, not a real lot, but it does create a lot of education. And I pride myself all through my career that what we like to do as a company and the culture that we have is to actually increase the amount of education of renewables in the case of battery storage, because that's an important component of battery storage. You know, you have solar, sun doesn't shine, you just don't have energy creation. When the wind doesn't blow, you'd have energy creation. When the water doesn't flow on hydro, you don't have energy creation. So you have to have something, and the country recognizes we have to do something, as well as the state of California, that we have to have energy storage. And a little bit more into the facts of energy storage in a little bit. But suffice it to say, you have to have energy storage. Otherwise, homes will not get any energy and the houses will go black. So you have to have something to store energy where you're not creating energy through renewable resources. We create the sites to aesthetically, environmentally pleasing environments. We also invest our own capital. Power Transition, working with our founding company, NCAP, we invest in everything. So we'll pay for the demolition. We'll pay for the restoration of the site. We'll pay for the construction of a new power plant, and we'll sell energy to the local utility. In this case, it's RCEA is who we're talking with. But I do want to point out this a little bit, so because there's a lot of questions about that. When I attend meetings, people say, "Well, what is battery storage? Or what does it look like?" And I'll get into a little more details later. But these containers, all they are is containers. And they're 24-foot long, they're 6 foot wide, and they're about 8 foot high. They vary a little bit here and there, depending on how much energy you're actually storing in the containers. And each one of these containers are about 1.9 megawatts or 3.9 megawatt hours for a 2-hour battery, right? You just double the amount of megawatts of the facility, and that's the amount of hours. So they come in 2-hour facilities, 4-hour, 6-hour. And then there are some people that are playing with 8 and 12-hour, but the containers are getting big, they're getting heavier. And so we're tending to shift to the 2 to 4-hour battery facility containers that you see. But interestingly enough, a 2-hour container like that will service 3,600 homes for about 2 hours. So when these conventional power plants lose power, or there's a storm, or there's other conditions that break the continuity of power coming into your homes, the energy storage from these facilities kick right in and they take over where the other conventional power is not provide that energy. So it's a real good backup. In California, just to give you some reference, there is 7,300 megawatts worth of energy storage. So there is a lot. I mean, that we're talking about 1,000 facilities or more, and they produce energy. They don't produce energy. They provide energy to about 6.5 million homes. And so there's a lot of homes in the state of California. From a national perspective, there's about 16,000 megawatts worth of energy storage in the United States, and they provide energy to about 14 million homes. So this is not something new. Now the technology is evolving, and I'll get into a little bit about it. So on the next slide. So power transitions, as I said, we started itself in 2023. But the individuals come from legacy companies. One is CAMS and the other one is a redevelopment company that started actually in 2009. And these individuals that were running these companies moved up into power transitions. Some of the companies still exist. Actually, CAMS still does exist. They're a consulting company that provides operational services for power stations, whether it be renewable or conventional power. And a lot of the executives came to Power Transitions. In addition, Power Transitions hired a lot of executives, such as myself, from outside in the marketplace. From myself, I've developed about 900 megawatts worth of solar and storage projects. On onshore wind, about 1,700 megawatts. So I have a lot of renewable experience. In California, some people ask, well, have I done any projects in California? I've developed 3 projects in California that are currently operating. One is the Avantas Solar CSP, which is almost a 400 megawatt facility down in San Bernardino. Catalina Ranch, which is 143 megawatts, it's down in Kern County. And then there's California Solar Ranch, which is in San Luis, at 250 megawatts. But Power Transitions has developed 2,700 megawatts of solar and storage projects in the United States. As far as the experience of the employees of Power Transition. So we're very experienced in this. And you can see on the bottom, on the left-hand side, we have $100 billion and 150 years worth of experience within the employees of the company. And we have managed over $500 million of environmental liability. So it's just give you a perspective on our. Next, please. Our parent company is NCAP. NCAP has had, you can see on the top right there, Active Energy Investments, a whole number of companies, and Realized Energy Investments, which are companies that became very large, and they became so large that they actually sold them off to large investors. And that includes like Broadreach Power, which is actually got 21,000 megawatts worth of solar, wind, and battery storage. A lot of those employees are working with us that are still part of NCAP. So again, we have all those resources. Jupiter Power is 11,000 megawatts, and they're all battery storage. So we have a lot of experience of people within the company. And you can see on the left-hand side how many gigawatts is you multiply it times 1,000. So 1.9 gigawatts is 1,900 megawatts of energy storage. So a little bit about our financial backer and the relationship we have with them in terms of a synergistic relationship to develop and implement these projects. So the next slide, please. So our plan that we propose to the city is you have the facility out there, which everybody's very familiar with. And it has a substation there. It's got a transformer. We don't know if the transformer is able to be redeveloped. It's reused. Have to explore that. But in any event, we have the transmission lines. Everybody's familiar. The transmission lines are coming into the substation. We plan on reusing that transmission line to connect to a new substation. We'd have new breakers, new safety equipment, things like that. And right now, what we're trying to do is we're trying to develop a 12.5 megawatt facility, which would line up with the 12.5 megawatts associated with the biomass facility that's currently there. And the idea of it is to try to get California Independent System Operator approval to try to implement that project on a fast track basis. We don't know if we're going to be successful or not. But we're certainly trying. We want to get everything in order. So when we go to California ISO, Cal ISO, we could say, hey, look, everybody's on board. Our CEA, the city, the permits, ourselves, our financing, the engineering, everything is ready to go. Why would you stop progress in the city of Blue Lake? That's our plan. And we think it makes sense. But if that doesn't happen, we'd have to go through a long process with Cal ISO. And believe it or not, we do have other projects that we're doing in California. One is down in the Bay Area. And it's a 7-year process to actually get their approval. It's a horrific undertaking to try to get California ISO's approval to develop energy projects, even renewable projects like battery storage, which is unbelievable, if you to tell you the truth. So our concept is to try to piggyback on the 12.5 megawatt with battery storage, which is a rating of the biomass facility. And of course, this is after the remediation of the site, cleaning up the site. And then the next phase, which will take 7 years, even whether anything happens to the 12.5 or not, the 100 megawatts would still take the 7 year, because that's called a large generator interconnection agreement with the California ISO. And it's as I said, it's a long, tedious process. But our plan is to actually acquire the site, demolish the plant, and develop these energy storage facilities. That's the concept. And then the other plan, as part of the overall scheme, is to clean up the entire site. So you have wood chips there, a lot of wood chips. And the idea is to get rid of those wood chips. And we have 2 demo companies that we're working with right now. We've been out to the site several times, and they're looking at places to dispose of everything, right? Not only the plant, not only the equipment, not only the structures, but also the wood chips. And so that is the concept, is to actually clean up that site so it's spick and span. And then with that, we have the rights to develop these energy storage facilities. That's kind of the concept. And we could ask questions, answer questions later. Next slide, please. Yeah. Simply stated, we're between these 2 facilities, the 12.5 megawatts and the 100 megawatts, it would be $175 million worth of investment in Blue Lake. So this includes the cost to develop these projects. It includes the cost to build these projects. It includes the cost to operate, initially start up into operations, these facilities. It's the taxes going into the community. It's the environmental cleanup. It's all this remediation that I talked about, the demo and remediation. It's the local goods and services. I mean, one of the demo companies is talking to the concrete shipping plant that's nearby here, right up the road, right up 299. They're interested. They said, hey, if you can get it down to 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot chunks, we could break it up and recycle it back into a better purpose. So we're really looking at using local goods and services, local contractors, and so forth. One of the important elements is this is grid resiliency. So this line is a dedicated line that goes into the Blue Lake substation. I know you're all aware of it. And that substation provides power to this community, right? And most of it through our CEA, I believe, right? Our intent is for this power, because of the way it's connected into the grid, adds tremendous grid reliability to Blue Lake. It's a huge benefit for the community. So if something gets disconnected coming into Blue Lake, coming up 299 where the main transmission line is, you have the energy coming out of these battery facilities to at least allow you to keep your house, lit up at night, heat and so forth. So we think that that's a very important element associated with the way this plant is located. As I said earlier, we want to increase education in schools about renewables. So we'd be happy to send our experts to the community and give the children lessons on renewable projects and what's going on around the country and around the world. And then of course, sustainable energy. So that's the intent and the investment level that we're talking about here. Next slide, please. So from a timing perspective, we are talking about where there's a procurement process with RCEA where they're sending out a request for proposal to energy companies that would be interested in selling power to them. And so we're going to participate in that. That's starting in December, and it's going to probably run for about 2 or so months, probably 2 months. They said probably to January. And then we would sign an agreement with our CEA. And then with everything else that I talked about earlier, our plan is to go with a fast track process, that big blue box on the bottom there, to go with a fast track process to California ISO. And a lot of it, we're going to have the demolition contractors in place. We'll have the technology in place. We'll have everything in place. And so CEQA, we'd have in place. Everything would be in place to try to convince the state, who has turned down other projects. So a little history. This plant's been shut down for 3 years. California ISO does not want to renew, does not, per its charter, renew the generating license of a site if it has been shut down for more than 3 years. So we're trying to convince California ISO this is really good for this community, right? Resiliency of energy, cleaning up the site, and all this employment, all this stuff, tax revenue, all this stuff. This has got to be something you should support. So that's the intent. And then sometime in 25, we would, assuming we can get there with CAISO, we would demolish the biomass facility. And then in 26, probably, because it is still about a 2-year process to actually start construction. By the time you get all your environmental permits and all these other things, we'd have to go out with a public procurement for contractors and get all that organized. It would be sometime in 26, could be early, could be middle, to actually start construction of that 12.5 megawatts. At the same time, we're going to start going into CAISO for the 100 megawatts at the same time. But we know that's going to be a 70. So that area is going to be sitting there, okay, all cleaned up and waiting for the 100 megawatts, but it's going to take quite a while. And that's why all the rest of that, starting 1B and operations of 1B, is pushed out to 2028 to 32. We don't know the exact timing, but that's sort of the rough time frame. So there is always a lot of questions about what is battery storage. First of all, there are a lot of battery supply companies here in the United States. There's a lot of Chinese companies that have come into the United States. There's a lot of companies like Tesla that has a very large factory here in the Valley, in the Sacramento Valley, here in the U.S. We're working with Tesla in other locations. We're actually working with them on a project up in Vermont. We're talking to them about the project down in the Bay Area. But there's probably about 20 to 30 companies that build these containers. So we would have to go out with a procurement process. We're a big procurement in procurement to try to drive costs down, quality up, and performance up. And so we would move to those companies sooner rather than later if we have an indication from Cal ISO that at least 12.5 megawatt will start. But it's interesting. A lot of people say, well, how safe is this? And I'm going to get to the safety in a little bit. But the batteries in your cell phones are lithium-ion batteries. This is lithium-ion phosphate batteries, which is a next evolution. The cell phones don't have that technology. But the bottom line is that the technology is the same. It's taking a chemical reaction and turning it into energy. And except in those containers, there's a lot of batteries. You know, if you took apart one of those things and you see all these racks of batteries, it would look like a heck of a lot of cell phones. And so, not exactly, but similar. So the technology, and I'll get into safety, is generally in line with cell phones. It captures electricity, other sources. Like I said earlier, what you're doing is you're taking energy from renewable sources, you're storing it there, and you're waiting for a interruption in flow of electricity, or you're waiting for peaks. Like sometimes there's a requirement for a lot of heat, or in summer, not as much up here, but air conditioning to some extent. But when there's a big load and the PG&E can't keep up with it, then these batteries take the place of PG&E and supplement the energy required to keep the homes lit and so forth. The other equipment there are inverters. Batteries are DC. Your cell phone is DC. That's why you have that little charger when you plug it in a wall. And that DC has to be converted to AC when it goes over the lines, the transmission lines. So you have an AC-DC converter in one of the containers. You have a lot of monitoring equipment, and we'll get to safety in a minute. But if the temperature starts getting too high in these containers, now, lithium ion phosphate has never had any fires. They've had where temperatures start rising, but they've never had any fire. So one thing that's important about it is that the safety monitoring is critical. And the protective enclosures, they're safe. If you walk around them, you hardly hear anything. You hear a whisper. If you're standing at the property line behind the bushes, that's protecting this, you'll hear nothing. Absolutely nothing. These things are quiet. There's only little itty bitty fans in there that are about this big. You don't even, it's be that kind of fan you hold in the summertime to blow on your face. They're really very, very innocuous. The key benefits is zero emissions. They have no moving parts other than the little exhaust fan. They have tremendous grid reliability. It reduces power outages, makes up for power outages. There's no runoff. There's no chemicals that are running off into the ground. There's nothing going up a stack. There's nothing. It's totally quiet and totally clean. If there's storms, wildfires, or anything, as I said, that can interrupt energy flow, given where you're located, this is a huge benefit. Next one, please. I just wanted to give a brief summary on this. This is the life cycle. So I always look at the beginning, with all my years in renewables, I always look at the beginning and how something is developed. So we always look at human rights and labor rights. We always look at anti-corruption. We always look at traceability of the components associated and included in these devices. We're always looking to make sure that it's coming from a reputable source. So we don't even look at the supplier. We look down into the components that are provided by the supplier, because so many pieces and parts are coming from so many different locations, and they're assembled, even by Tesla. They're assembled here in California. And you have to recognize that somebody has to keep track to make sure they're getting from reliable sources. That's sort of the development side. On the end of life side, everybody says, well, what happens to these things after they finish their useful life? I mean, the useful life is about 15 or 20 years, right? Well, now technology has evolved significantly. So there's a repurposing of these batteries, the cells that are in these containers. So what they do is they take the cells and then they reuse them for other purposes. So for example, a lot of them that are in existing battery facilities, utility-based battery facilities, now they're being put in the batteries that go into people's homes to charge their Teslas or charge their electric vehicles. So they're repurposing, because you don't want to have the flow rate for an electric vehicle that you would have going into a transmission line for energy. So they're repurposing these batteries now for other useful markets. They recycle all the valuable metals and minerals that are in these things, like lithium and nickel and magnesium and things like that. And then if there is anything left over, then there is a safe disposal technique by the battery companies themselves. So they take responsibility for the waste product that they produced in the creation of these batteries. So next one, please. So the most important thing is fire protection. Way back when there was fires, like I said, the lithium ion phosphate has had no fires. There's been literally thousands of installations across the country. notion of the fabrication of these things now is if the temperature ever starts rising, they shut off. So they have very careful, very strict monitoring systems within the cabinets. So now they're incredibly safe. And that's why if you chat GPT'd or Googled or whatever, you would see that lithium ion phosphate has not had any fires. And there's, like I said, there's been thousands of them across the United States and the rest of the world. So their modular design, they have a thermal management system which monitors overheating. It manages the liquids within the battery cells. Like if you could open up your cell phone, you'll eventually find a little bit of liquid in there. But there is fire suppression systems as just in case. They're not removing that from the design, even though there hasn't been any overheatings of these facilities. And then there's early detection, there's monitoring, and there's emergency response. And the question might be, well, what does the fire department have to do? Is there something that the local fire department needs to do? And the answer is there are foam suppression systems, there's water and mist systems, there's inert gas systems, dry chemical systems. There's a lot of systems to basically put out extensive heat fires. And a lot of them are used by CAL FIRE, right? And so, first of all, all these batteries are very strictly isolated between each other. So if any cell gets hot, and it in some occasion, if it ever caught on fire, there's not only is there an emergency response system within that cell, then the fire department, which we supply training and materials to, is totally aware of what it would take if they are actually called to an event. In this case, at this site. So, as I said, there's been only 4 cases of overheating of this technology battery in the whole United States. One was Moss Landing in California, one was in China, one was in South Korea, and one was in Arizona. And that's it, out of thousands of these installations. So it's pretty good. And technology is evolving, and they're keeping the same fire protection equipment in them just in case. And I think that's it. If there's any questions. So we did this, point out, did this artist rendering. If you could scroll that down a little bit for aesthetic purposes, the other way. So we did this artist rendering. Thank you. We did this artist rendering just to give an idea to the city of what we were thinking that kind of coincided with the master plan that you're thinking about. There's a lot of other activities that are going on, I know, in your master plan. I heard the mention earlier about the master plan. I don't mention that somebody here. But the bottom line is we just kind of thought that this might be a view of what it would look like from up on high. If you're down at the street level, you're not going to see anything because we put in very thick shrubs and bushes and you just don't see anything behind them unless you're up in the air on a drone. And so we thought of an RV park, swimming facilities, ballpark, maybe a soccer field or just any kind of play field for the kids and so forth. That was an idea that, and this is kind of similar to the extent without the RV park that we're actually doing up in Vermont with this. This is a nuclear facility that we're actually developing this at up in Vermont. We have the ballpark and we have the ball field and the BESS facility. By the way, you hear the word BESS is battery energy storage system. It's called what BESS stands for. So that's pretty much it. It's kind of the concept.
Thank you. Did staff want to add anything to this? And then we'll open it up for discussion because I certainly want to open this up to the public and questions or comments from our council as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff, for all that information. This has been a project that the city's been working on for years. When I came on board, obviously, Blake Power was pretty non-operational. They did try and operate for about a year and never really was able to make that happen. So knowing that we did have a valuable asset associated with the property being the substation and the transformer and that interconnect, the city really looked hard at what our options would be to be able to leverage that asset in order to provide value for the community and also continue to participate in the renewable energy sector. So we've been looking at battery storage for a number of years. And in fact, when we did the RV park and campground development master plan, we actually designed that park with the idea that we might have a battery storage development project partnering with it. So we actually, if you look at the RV park development design, you'll see kind of a carve out with a large parking area and some buildings that we kind of set aside, not knowing what a battery storage system might look like in the future, but knowing we needed to kind of reserve that footprint. So the overall development plan from day one included the opportunity to have a project like this. It's an interesting project. I think it's really exciting. I think everyone realizes that, renewables are great, but we're losing a lot of their capacity by not being able to store that energy when we need to. And thinking about Blue Lake continuing to be a partner in presenting opportunities for green energy solutions and working with RCEA to be a part of that, I think is something that's kind of been at the forefront of Blue Lake um, for a long time. As a kid, when Blake Power came in, obviously we were sold the story of that, this was green energy and it was going to be great for the community. And everyone was really excited to think that we were part of some type of kind of cutting edge green solution. So I think this is kind of an evolution of that process. And hopefully it's an evolution that's where we've learned a lot and are able to be part of something that provides benefit to our community as well as our region. Just to clarify, also, the city's been working with RCEA for a number of years as well to assist us in this process. So we actually have an MOU with RCEA. They're providing resources and helping us evaluate options and opportunities. RCEA recognizing that Blue Lake also has this valuable asset with the substation and the transformer. So we've been really working closely with Richard Engel and Jocelyn and their crew, who have the expertise that we don't have. So it's exciting to kind of see this start to come together. And working with power transitions. I know there were some questions about why Blue Lake was being looked at, and the obvious answer is because we have the facilities, and we're looking really at leveraging those facilities to be able to clean up this site and continue to grow and provide economic benefit, recreation benefit to the community. The city does not have the money to clean up the site. I mean, we're talking $850,000 to $1 million to clean up the kind of the legacy that Blue Lake Power left us. And being able to clean that site up, transition it over to something that the city can really grow our economic future on is, really something that we've been focusing strongly on. So that's kind of the intention that we laid out very early on. And it's a path that we've been continuing to move forward and explore very thoughtfully and methodically. Sometimes, in the community, there's questions about that process. Maybe, not everyone sees every step that we're taking or understands the totality of the thought process. But it has been a very methodical process to get to this point where we have something for council and the community to consider. So that is, I'm open to questions as well. Obviously, the site is still zoned heavy industrial. We did not rezone that site through the rezoning process for the opportunity zone, so it's still well within its original use and context. It is compatible with the general plan. Looking at industrial uses and their compatibility and sometimes incompatibility with different uses in the district was something that has always been considered, is actually identified in the general plan. noise issues, the city does have zoning that monitors and defines what our noise restrictions are. So that's something that's very critical and is in place to protect as much as we can the community. I can say, as someone who grew up next to a power plant for 34 years, plant was really, really noisy. And there's a lot of noise still down in the Powers Creek district when we look at all the different uses. So noise has always been a factor. And in looking at the noise issues associated with a BESS installation, it's very much reduced from what, those of us who remember what the operation of the plant sounded like were used to. So um, lots of things that have to be considered. CEQA is a big part of that, looking at the environmental issues associated with it. But just thinking about what the operation looked like previous with the power plant, the number of trucks coming through, the sounds, the emissions, this is very much a different type of green energy project that can provide a lot of benefit to the community.
Okay, so I know there's a lot of questions. I have one. Is there a manager on site or managers on the sites of these projects?
Not normally in battery energy storage. There's a secure fence, there's shrubbery, the containers are all self-contained, there's no way to get in them. And so normally,
But somebody has to monitor, and then there's security, and then someone has to come around and monitor
yes,
what's going on.
it's all remote. There's a central facility.
Could I ask you when you're speaking to come up here, because otherwise, folks don't hear
That's a
you.
good idea. Thank you. It's a good question. There is security. The monitoring of this facility is all done remotely. There are people that go to the facility quite often to check on the calibration associated with the metering that goes on within the panels. But there's no reason to have a full-time person there. They would have literally nothing to do. And it's all secured. I mean, you've seen these containers. These containers are solid steel. There's no way you can get into them, and so forth. So, yeah, but there is security. That's for sure.
You,
Huh? There would be a security company that would be engaged to patrol it. He wouldn't be there full time, but he would go there from time to time and make sure that there's no holes in the fence, there's no damage, there's no anything associated with safety.
you say that there's thousands of these across the United States,
Mhm.
no fires, very few overheating. How long have they been in use?
Since the beginning, 1996,
So
I think is the earlier dates in
the
which the
lithium
battery.
ion phosphorus ones,
Lithium ion phosphate has been years now, several years.
several years.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then I had a question. So the battery life is about 15 to 20 years. And then at the point that the battery needs to be replaced, who takes on the cost for you guys
We
to
also
work
take
on?
on the cost of, at the end of all of its useful life,
Mhm.
we take on the cost associated with dismantling it and moving it out. Yeah, these are pretty simple. There's a concrete pad, right? Just a concrete pad, and these containers sit on the pad. And underneath the pad, there's some duct bank pipe, and that goes to a building another container that has the AC/DC converters and all the monitoring and metering equipment in it. And then it comes out of that and up into the transformer and out across the transmission lines. Pretty simple, really simple. And there's no exposed wires. There's nothing exposed that anybody could get into trouble, if you know what I'm saying. I mean, I had 3 children, so, so yeah, it's all self-contained and all sealed.
The recreation RV park free use zone, after this is all cleaned up and are you going to be building this alongside, or is there like a timeline? Where would you put that in the timeline also?
We didn't plan on building the facilities. We did talk a bit about putting EV charging because that kind of makes sense. We do have in the plan a parking lot there.
Yeah.
And our idea was to put EV charging in the parking lot. So if people are going to ball games or whatever it happens to be, they can go and use the EV charging stations because it's energy and it's right there. But the ballpark and the rest of the facilities we didn't plan on building. But you know, it depends on what happens with the economics out in the future. Right now with 12.5 megawatts, it would be hard to financially support that with the cost of the demolition. So
Okay.
when you add all of it together, it's a lot of cost. And our CEA made it very clear that they don't want to fund all these other, they don't want to do anything in terms of their funding of what they're selling to the ratepayers associated with the demolition of the current biomass facility.
Yeah.
So we
So-
couldn't pass it on to
That's
the
okay.
CEA.
I just wanted to clarify that you would just be getting the land ready for that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And then would you want to contract with someone else to build an RV park? I mean, that was sort of the vision of what our town had for this multi-use area.
So just to clarify, so Jeff's company is looking at just the battery storage project. So what we're looking at is continuing to look at investment for the rest of the project, including the RV park and everything. So, but what he's showing on the slide is that the carrying capacity of the site and that both projects can coexist together and that there's enough available space for those projects to basically take place at the same time. So the city would be looking at finding investment for the rest of the development. He wanted to show that the battery storage project can be cited and not impact the ability to do the rest of what the city's been working on.
And it's about a 21 acre site. So we're
Mhm.
talking about six acres.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's correct.
So on that note, I don't know if you have our packet, but on pages 9 and 10 of our packet, it shows phase 1 and 2, and phase 1 is spoken of in the document as a 6 acre parcel, and phase 2 encompasses the rest of the property, which I believe is something like 16 acres.
Yeah.
So can you speak to that, please?
I can. So we have I mean, like all companies, we have a broader vision, right? So if in fact we go through and we are able to get the 12.5 megawatt build, let's assume that can happen within a few years, plant gets demolished, all the development starts occurring. We still have the 7-year period for California ISO, right? If that is going well and the city hasn't sold the rest of the property or leased the rest of the property or developed the rest of the property, I want to make the point that we're interested potentially, if the economics work, for the rest of the property. So if the city would like to lease us the land or sell us the land to have a larger energy storage facility, the answer is yes, if all things worked out. If the city wants to do it, if we want to do it, it's just a concept at this point.
So basically, they're asking for a right of first refusal. So in the event that the city goes forward with a different type of energy project, say we decide RV park, everything, it's not going to work. We don't want to do it. We want to focus solely on energy. They want the right of first refusal to be able to bid on that project because they
Understood.
would already be there.
Yeah,
So
or-
the city
That's
is still
understood.
dedicated to the
My
rest.
question, though, speaks to the 12 megawatt versus the 100 megawatts. So in this rendering,
Mhm.
you have the 12 megawatt in a fairly small area
Mhm.
and the 100 megawatt right next to it. So
In a
that would
larger
all
area.
that would all fit in the 6 acre
Yes.
designation.
That's correct.
Okay.
Absolutely correct.
Has this presentation been given to our CEA?
No, but we've talked to our CEA in detail and they're very excited.
Okay.
I mean, they are really excited. As a matter of fact, the tender process that they're going out with, they want to see Blue Lake succeed. They want to see something developed for Blue Lake. So that's very exciting for us and it's exciting for the city, I'm sure.
Any other questions? for
Yeah, like
council?
earthquake contingencies, flooding. I mean, thoughts.
Well, we'll do a floodplain analysis and determine what elevation we need to build the platforms up to, the foundations up to. Right now, our indication is that there isn't a problem there with regards to floodplain, at least that the biomass site hasn't seen extensive floodplain, so we might have pads. We might have to bring in some earth to raise it up a few feet and then have the pad. The pad is always another 6 feet to 6 inches to a foot. So we have drainage, like any site would have drainage, right? As far as what was your
Earthquake.
Earthquake? Yeah, everything is designed for California
Sure.
earthquake.
Yeah.
I mean, that
And
would
then
be it.
as far as like how many units are we looking at? Like the 12 megawatt? How many units? Like
Eight.
how many? 8. Okay. Thank you.
It's about 8. I think it shows in the rendering. It's
Okay,
about 8.
yeah. Just want to double
Yeah.
check. Thank
There
you.
might be 8 plus the power management AC/DC converter,
Cool.
but that's about it.
Thank you, Jeff.
And those are all 20 foot containers.
24. I think there are 24-foot containers.
20.
Yeah. Now technology is changing. Lithium ion phosphate is actually a little bit bigger because it's not as dense, and that's why it's 24 feet and maybe not 20 feet.
Mhm.
Is but technology is changing every day in this business. So these container sizes might get smaller. They're probably not going to get bigger. They're not going to get higher, because everybody's worried about aesthetics and view. We want to make sure the shrubbery confines the space. So aesthetically, it's very pleasing to see that area. So yes.
Okay, we'll continue discussion. Let's open this up then for the public. I appreciate you raising your hand and coming.
I'll stay here.
Well, we also need to have people's questions mic'd, so it's going to be a back and forth thing.
Oh.
Yeah. Stand by. All right, let's see. We'll start with Kit Man, Mr. Ponte, and Marty Granger, and then Julie on Zoom.
Thanks. You already introduced me. I'm Kit Man. The technically the nearest residential structure to the industrial park. But I got questions that fall into 2 categories. One regarding the next agenda item, which is the exclusive right to negotiate. I'm going to leave those questions to that. So these are technical questions. I just wanted to confirm, did you say that the whole site, including the chips, would be cleaned up with the first 12.5 megawatt phase?
We're going to try to do that. That is our plan. We're to see if we can get that to work. So that is our intent.
Okay.
We don't know if it's going to be successful, but we're going to work with the city on that. Right now, we have found several facilities that are willing to take the chips. Several facilities are willing to take the chips, and we're studying how much it would cost to truck out all their chips to those other facilities. One in the Central Valley and one south of you.
Yeah. What's the source of energy to charge the batteries? Since we don't have a solar system or something, are we just pulling it off the grid?
Yeah. It's PG&E will provide us the energy to charge the batteries.
So that happens like in the middle of the night or something?
Yeah, that's a good question. The whole intent of battery energy storage is when it serves 2 purposes. One is to make up for when there's a loss of energy availability. The second is to try to temper the cost of energy. So at peak periods, the idea is to try to get the cost lower. So we charge the batteries at night when the energy usage is lower. So morning and evening, when people get up to go to work or when they come home, that's when energy costs are really it's a curve. The idea is to charge the batteries at the low end of that curve. Okay, the lowest end of that curve, the batteries get charged, and the energy, when the price of electricity is going up, they contact us, CAISO, which is a powerful agency. They contact us and they say, hey, prices are going up. We need you to release your energy to get the pricing down because we bought the energy at a lower cost. So it serves 2 purposes, resiliency and price stability.
Great,
Yeah,
thanks.
I just want to mention that when you're speaking at the microphones, if you're not about this close to the mic, it may not pick you up. So a lot of people are going to be watching the recording of this. So if you could step very close when you're speaking,
Can.
please. Thank you.
Last technical question is, how would the 100 megawatt move energy through a 12 megawatt intertie?
The interconnection is a 69 kV interconnection. All of that's a really good question. All of the PG&E small lines, I mean, there are some very small lines, but all of the small lines in the state of California are 69 kV. 69 kV can handle around 100 megawatts worth of energy. So that line that was put in way back when was capable of handling up to 100 megawatts or thereabouts. Could be 80, it could be 120, but it's thereabouts. Yeah. Good question.
Okay, I think Dave Ponte, you were next, then Marty, and then Julie.
Yeah, thank you. PG&E wouldn't be considered a renewable source of energy, though, would they? I mean, first, battery storage, we listen to battery storage, and demo and remediation is incredible
Mhm.
when you think about the status of the old Ultra Power. Um, but in looking through the your website, and it seems like the business plan would be battery storage one, two, development of renewables on site. And then another factor would be the development of that energy that could be provided to encourage new industry to move in, which in the website was chip manufacturing and data analysis, which in Blue Lake would be incredible. But the source of energy to me was most interesting, and all I've heard today is that we're looking at battery storage, the source of energy being PG&E, and I don't see where that meets this green idea of utilizing renewables. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good point. First of all, we would love to do solar in tandem with the battery energy storage facility. So if there is a big chunk of land, and actually I did have a discussion with Mandy and other folks, and I made some calls with some numbers that I was provided to some of the property owners associated with the land that is adjacent to the proposed site. Um, we want it to be close because you don't want to have any load losses associated with getting energy from a solar plant to a battery storage. So I was looking at land around that area, and that is still our intent to look at a land around that area for battery energy storage. Um, if anybody wants to provide us help in moving that forward, boy, we are very happy to do that. But we do want to build solar. We have many sites across the U.S. that have solar with battery energy storage. As a matter of fact, most of the solar plants that are being built today do have battery energy storage. So we would like to do that, but there is a lot of standalone battery energy storage. The intent of the energy storage facilities is, like I said, resilience and cost mitigation, cost reduction. Um, PG&E is trying to source more and more energy. Like I said, I've done 3 projects not for PG&E, but PG&E is the off-taker, solar projects, about 900 megawatts worth of projects. But I have to say, electrons are flowing through wires all the time. There's no way to be fungibly, it's fungible. They don't know where the electrons are. They're coming from renewable, they're coming from gas, they're coming from nuclear, and so forth. So unless you have a solar facility right next door charging those batteries, you can't be guaranteed that those battery storage is going to be renewable energy because electrons are fungible. They're floating around. And so I invite anybody to offer the opportunity for us to do solar. That would be a wonderful opportunity. Um, so that's a good question. Yeah.
Okay. Just follow up. I mean, there is the entire current, so the where all the chips are. There's across the street. There's property all around in what was the industrial zone. I mean, is that not a city interest? No.
I can answer that to some degree. Our CEA did an exercise in the last year to provide information related to energy solar generation at that site, the 22-acre site. And what they found was that it was not it didn't pencil. It wasn't a feasible idea for that location, um, and that amount of space. So, and that was kind of an idea, and maybe Stephen can speak to that a little bit too. Um, that was an idea of us of owning it, of RCEA owning and building something like that. Um, so that was just sort of an exercise in terms of deciding whether something, a generation and storage project together on that particular location was something that RCEA could propose and own, build and own
Yeah.
and operate.
I think another answer to that question, if I may, it is that a lot of times we're looking at larger tracts of land than 20 or something acres because of the economy of scale. So building solar on a small lot, like 20 acres, is from a cost perspective is in many cases not economically viable. You need large tracts of land to make it economically viable. Because if you have a smaller solar project on a smaller piece of land, then the capital cost is higher, and therefore the energy cost coming out of that solar is higher. And so for that purpose, we need bigger chunks of land. I mean, we're actually looking at some places we have a lease on land. We have 7,000 acres. So, I mean, as an example, that pencils out to be a very good solar project. Just an example.
Appreciate it.
Okay, I think it was Marty next, then Julie, then Steve Coleman.
Marty Granger. I really thought your presentation was good, but I'm going to respond not only mentally, but emotionally, I guess. I just don't like the feeling of these toxic things being so close to Blue Lake. I don't like the process of mining this lithium, and I don't really like much about it. Um, Also, this may seem kind of far out, but I'm hearing information that a lot of new technologies are about to be released and patents that have been kept quiet, and that this technology might be kind of old. That there's Tesla free energy coming, not the Tesla company, but from Tesla, where we won't need this, will all be outdated. And I'd hate to end up with a bunch of this toxic stuff in Blue Lake here. Thank you.
Julie,
For taking my comments on Zoom. Whenever in-house feels it's
We
more
can't hear
appropriate
you.
we can't hear you, Julie. Can you be a little louder?
You guys were able to hear me just fine last time, so usually they turn the volume
That's
up
better
and
now.
then perfect. Thank you. So I'm getting back to thanking you guys for taking the Zoom, but I am always polite. I don't mind waiting till all the in-house speak. You're gonna have to cut me off. I can't see a timer, but I'm gonna just roll this and tell Jeff, thank you for being there this presentation. I'm gonna kind of put out some points that I'm not really expecting any responses back from you. I feel very grateful that council is allowing dialogue back and forth during this special council meeting. I think that's really important for transparency. This is listed on the agenda, however, as a discussion action item. And being an action item, I want to quote our mayor back when we decided to terminate the lease for the plant. And it was quoted that we are having other ideas at this time, and another council might decide otherwise. I feel like we have another council coming, and at this point in time, there is a lot of dialogue, community involvement, and discussion. And I think it is imperative that we do continue this as discussion and not an action item tonight. We have general plan points that are disclosing that we are not to be prioritizing selling off city properties. We're already in negotiations for the courtyard that's not cleaned up and cleared out, to the sewer treatment plant that there is a lot of dialogue with that needs to be transparent for that to be a future site. I feel like there is so much going on, you guys, as I'm overwhelmed here at my farm all the time. I feel the stress. I feel the need for renewable energy. I've always been a proponent of that since back when we denied the lease. I said, let's get renewable energy in there. It's the most appropriate thing for the site. But however, the procedures that we're doing this, if this site backs out and if this is a purchase agreement whatsoever in the beginning processes, I mean, I'm not okay with selling off a property, neither is the general plan. I guess at the end of the day, let's just start there. Let's stop getting in negotiations. Let's selling off our properties. Let's get jobs. Let's get sales tax. And let's get lease agreements that bring us some revenue. I'll leave it at that because this is a long discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Stephen Coleman. I do work for RCEA, but I'm not here on behalf of RCEA in any official capacity. I'm on the demand side, so I'm the conservation efficiency guy, not the power procurement guy. But as a resident of Blue Lake, I have a question and a statement. I guess I'll start with a question first. Given the high possibility that you're not going to get your way with CAISO, what I mean, if you do get your way with CAISO, I would be overjoyed. That would be fantastic and
Yeah.
great precedent for a lot of other sites. But so if you weren't and go into that 7-year process, what would that mean for the cleanup timeline?
We'll still clean up as much as we can. Yeah. We're still going to do it.
So there would still be
As long as we have an agreement with the city, we're committed to this site. As long as the city wants to do this at this site, we're committed to it.
okay. That's sounds good. And then I just wanted to talk about real quick my statement portion when we're talking about the renewable energy and the clean energy and storage, and something that I've often said and learned when you're not only is when you're pulling energy into the battery when it's cheapest,
Mm-hmm.
that's also generally when it's cleanest. And when you're selling energy back to the grid, that's not only when it's most expensive, but that's when all those peaker plants come on. And so that's the dirtiest energy. And so being able to level out that curve is also cleaning up the entire PG&E grid. And it's allowing those peaker plants not to be built, not to come online that are the most polluting ones. So there is a really strong advantage to selling the energy back when it's most expensive and dirtiest. Thanks.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask a clarifying question about that because it seemed like when Jeff was talking about when these batteries are being charged, they're being charged at night. And my understanding is that at night there is obviously zero solar generation and very little wind generation. So
Okay, so I think you're familiar with this. There's a curves called the duck curves. And the duck curves are the curve that shows that in the morning, when people are getting ready to go to work and into the office, that's when the demand is the highest. They're turning on the lights, turning on their appliances. During the day, it comes down quite a bit and it levelizes. So it is down. And then when people get home at night, it spikes back up again. So the batteries are charging when they have space to charge. I mean, that's just the concept that exists. So even during the day, if there is renewable energy in the grid, right, then the batteries are charging during the day. Those batteries are always charging whenever time allows, right? So during the day, when energy use kind of levels off, right, then we're charging. We're also charging at night when energy use goes way down. So as this gentleman said, it's a load and price balancing.
right. But any charging that happens at night is going to be probably fossil fuel or nuclear energy that's going into your battery.
Could be, yeah. Or we might have the battery fully charged during the day, and there won't be any need to charge at night. It depends on how much of the battery is discharged at the peak demand period.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Lynn? Oh, we weren't done, Steve?
You can respond, but I don't need to. Also, it's a very
Okay,
charging.
okay. Lynn, Mike, Jean, and then Becky.
It's very good.
There you go.
Good questions.
Yeah,
So I have three
it's
questions.
four at a time here.
My name is Lynn Glenn, and I have three questions. How much income would come to the city under phase one? And how much income would come to the city under phase two? And what is the source of those dollars?
Yeah, the total spend, I did write that down because I thought somebody would ask. I can tell you. So phase one, 1A is about $22 million. That includes tax revenue during the construction period. That includes the cost to build the facility. That includes local labor. That includes materials. That includes everything.
Actually, I'm asking about actual income because the city right now is facing a deficit of income with the loss of the lease to that property.
Yeah,
So
right.
I'm wondering how many actual dollars would come to the city under phase one and phase
I don't know
two
how much
from
the
this
tax
project.
dollars would be.
Only tax dollars?
Yeah, I think that question remains to be negotiated in terms of what purchase or lease values would be. And so with the second item, that grants the city the authorization to go ahead and negotiate those things, and that'll take place over the next 90 to 150 days in terms of what the revenue could be.
So power transition is considered a lease or for a sale,
Purchase.
of
Yes,
course, purchase.
that's correct.
Okay. And is there a difference in, I guess, well, the next question is going to be answered also next discussion. If there's a difference between, or what the difference would be between a lease and a sale, year to year, like what is the actual money that's coming to the city in each year of those periods? And the last one is who would pay for the cleanup of the site when the project's over? Remembering that Blue Lake Power's lease, I believe, required them to clean up the site when their lease ended.
We would clean up the site.
So that would be part of the
Part of the agreement.
the agreement.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think what she's trying to get at is what kind of taxable income would be coming in during the use of the facility, not like the ending of the sale, right?
Just the city. What does the city get monthly in terms of dollars
Yeah.
from this? Yes.
And that would be in the negotiations, as the lawyer indicated in the next item that we're going to discuss, item 6. So we're
Thank
still
you.
on 5. Okay, so I think, Mike, were you next?
Actually, let me ask my question.
Oh, okay. Then after you was Jean, and then Becky, and then Kat Napier. Okay, go ahead, Jean.
Hi.
I had a question actually. Is the levy is not certified right now, and if you were aware of that,
Mm-hmm.
so you don't have between earthquake and not the certified and flooding, you don't have any concerns about the storage of the batteries.
Currently, we don't, but there needs to be a CEQA process that we'd engage in that would define the viability of that or not. That would be part of this negotiating period. Once we enter into exclusivity, we'll release the funding to go do the engineering to analyze all of that prior to actually signing a purchase agreement.
Okay, and so the lines are owned by PG&E.
Mm-hmm.
The transmission comes across. So
Mm-hmm.
um, the wind tunnel, RCEA is involved with the process for building the wind tunnels. So that would be part of the process that, if I understand, that the wind tunnels would generate the electricity and then it could be stored here. So
Some of it.
some of it. Okay.
Very little of it, but yes.
So the wind tunnel building process is going to be a long process also.
I've been involved in a lot of offshore wind projects in my life. I worked for GE for a number of years, and we do offshore wind. We did offshore wind. The offshore wind projects are built in phases. They build the onshore facilities, and then they start building one wind turbine at a time. They put the wind turbines online, and then it builds up over time. So if the wind turbine is 10 or 12 megawatts, some of them are bigger now, those wind turbines would come online, and then they would feed electrons into the grid. As they build up, they're feeding more electrons into the grid, and they actually have to put in transmission to facilitate that. So the answer is it comes in
It
phases.
comes in phases.
Yes, yeah,
So
yeah.
the wind turbines, the companies that are involved in the wind turbines are also involved with the companies that you're
No, we're
in
not
with? No,
affiliated with those
you're not.
companies at
Oh,
all. We know these guys. I work with RWE, right? Yeah, I worked with them over for years, but
yeah.
not for them, but with them on developing projects. And yeah, they're very reputable. I mean,
And
they're
just
fixing
as
it.
a personal note, my brother worked for GE. He's a
Ah,
nuclear engineer.
okay.
Yeah, and so I can see the process for the nuclear coming in across the lines and
Yep.
then the renewable energy. I myself opted out of with RCEA for electricity. So this actually would not the pricing. I would be staying with the PG&E pricing and not the renewable pricing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, thank
It
you.
might change. It might change over time. This might enhance RCEA's pricing. It might. I mean, that's the intent. Looking over at RCEA. Yeah, not only to push out that corner. But that's the intent, is to actually help the pricing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think Becky, you were next, and then Kat Napier.
Um, Actually, I just sort of have a reminder of something from the general plan to keep in mind as you're going through. And in it, it does state, unless there is a compelling reason to do otherwise, the city shall retain its current ownership in the business park and instead provide incentives to encourage businesses to locate there. So, lease, not sell. That's just all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, yeah.
I just love this group. You guys have such great questions and insights. I guess I wanted to bring to you, sir, if you could maybe share, because my first question on power transitions and your battery storage, how many of those sites would you say roughly are leased, and how many of those sites are owned?
That's a really good question. Most of them are leased. And the reason most of them are leased is because the the utility or the industrial facility, we do have some industrial facilities that we don't want at this point in time to actually shut down or remove those facilities. Um, the facilities where they're looking at selling, where they want remediation of the facility. I mean, it kind of fits together, right?
Oh, yeah, you want to get that albatross
Yeah.
around your neck, sure.
And so we have a lot of these power plants in the United States have a lot, and generally they have a lot of land. So, yeah, right. So looking at utilizing the land.
So suffice it to say that it's definitely not unfair for you guys to work with a lead partner. And I think that's kind of what you were just saying,
Right,
Becky.
yeah, that's right.
What are one of the major distinctions then when you're moving forward on a leased property than purchase property? I know you're not going to give away any trade secrets here, but could you kind of sketch out in general what is the difference when you approach a property in this arrangement on lease versus on purchase?
On purchase, we if we're being asked to remediate a facility, then we're looking at a purchase option concept because the value of the land in the future, because of the long process we have to go through with California ISO as an example, we want to make sure that who wants to lease land for 7 years, right? I mean, not, you just don't. What are you paying for? So the idea is that you actually buy the land and you actually have the value of the land that pays for the cost of the remediation, and accrues in value so that when you actually invest the money to build the renewable facility, then the land is got net value, positive net value. You can capitalize the cost of land when you purchase land, but when you pay a lease payment, there's no capitalization. You're just making a lease payment, right? So it's a matter of patience and timing. If something can happen sooner, lease it. If something's going to happen a long ways from now, then purchasing makes the most economic sense because you have the value of the land to offset the remediation.
And in this instance, though, I think what I'm hearing and from what Becky had just mentioned with the general plan, it wouldn't be a deal killer for us to do a lease with power transitions
If
on
the
this.
city has the money to demolish the facility, you're right.
It's
If
not a
if
deal killer, to lease the land
it's
for
not
you
a deal
guys.
killer for us to lease the land,
That's great. Thank you so much, sir. I
if
appreciate
the
that.
city has the money to demolish the plant. Yeah. Yeah.
Are there any other comments from the public? This is a discussion item only. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Sherry Starr. I'm one of Blue Lake's newest citizens.
Hello,
I have been
welcome,
a
Sherry.
Humboldtian for 9 years. And I was looking online about BESS, and specifically down in San Diego. The San Diego County Board of Supervisors was considering an urgent moratorium on new BESS facilities awaiting higher safety standards. And they were saying that it was urgent because there were a lot of companies trying to get their projects approved before those higher safety standards went into effect. I guess my question is, I'll save the questions. Just back in September, there was a BESS fire in Escondido, and it involved one of these containers. So it was not one of the chain reaction fires that lasted for 17 days that happened also this year down in San Diego. So just for this one container fire, they had to evacuate a 60-acre square foot, well, 60-acre territory, which would be kind of comparable to evacuating from the power plant to the logger, or from the power plant up to here, or say from the power plant over to the gas station at the casino. Everything I've seen online doesn't speak to that safety level that we're hearing about tonight. So I wonder, is this brand, but you're saying it's not brand new technology.
You're asking a
Has,
question?
no, not yet. Sorry. Has the city's insurance carrier been consulted about the proposal, and how much would the premium increase be once there's a BESS facility here on site? I guess that's my one question for now.
Well, I want to answer one question that you brought up. The SP fire, I heard of that certainly. Anytime there's a fire, but that was a lithium ion technology. It was an old technology, lithium ion phosphate. There has been no fires. And the safety precautions, and you could see, and I think I have one slide in this presentation that talks about all the regulations, recent regulations that have been put in place to support that. And the technology is advanced. Certainly, battery technology providers don't want fires because it hurts them because the fallback is on them also. And so they're creating technology, isolation technologies, fire protection, heat monitoring and sensoring, and so forth and so on, as well as the chemical composition, all to prevent any fires from ever happening. And they have been successful with that. So just that.
So the examples I saw was one facility was built in 2020.
Yeah.
But why is
No,
the technology being offered to Blue Lake apparently so much far superior to what has been built recently in counties that have much greater population and much more wealth than we do here in Humboldt?
why are we offering the best technology to ensure we protect the community? Is that what you're asking?
It seems surprising that Blue Lake would get that offer when larger and more wealthy counties have recently built things that are not quite as safe.
Reputational risk, right? Protecting the community has got to be number one. I've had a long career, and I, in my career, have always focused on protection of the community, no matter what the technology is, including nuclear, which I worked on for many years. And I've always been very safety conscious. And I'm not going to work for a company or be associated with a company that doesn't use the latest, greatest, best, and safest technology. That's just the bottom line. I won't represent a company that doesn't use the latest, greatest, and best technology for safety. So, I mean, that's my feeling.
That was my time, right? Did I hear?
Thank you,
That's a
Sherry.
good question. Thanks.
Other questions or comments before we move on? Okay. Oh, John, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I just had a quick question. if you're currently installing lithium ion or the other version of that, could you then come in with a newer technology later on and swap that in as well?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Tesla is designing all their mega packs to accommodate changes in technology.
Okay.
So the answer is yes.
Would we have any oversight over that coming in, or would that just be?
Why not?
Okay. Thank you.
Why not? I mean, this is a partnership. I mean, you got to admit. I mean, if you're putting a power facility, an energy storage facility in a community, it's got to be a partnership. And the agreement could say that there is a review process associated with the implementation of changes in technology.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, for sure.
Any other questions or comments from public? Okay, as I said, this is a discussion item only. Then we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is item 6. Consider approval of exclusive right to negotiate agreement with Power Transitions Operations LLC. Discussion and possible action.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. So tonight is an agreement that the council has seen before when it's come to negotiating with private parties for the lease or sale of city property. This agreement requires only that the city negotiate in good faith for a 90-day period. This agreement does not bind the city to any other course of action than to negotiate exclusively and in good faith with Power Transitions. The negotiating period is 90 days, but Power Transitions has 2 additional options to extend it for an additional month with additional consideration. In exchange for the exclusive right to negotiate, Power Transitions is going to pay the city a $15,000 negotiating fee for the initial 90 days and then $2,500 per additional monthly extension if necessary and in the event that Power Transitions exercises the right to extend the negotiating period. The agreement requires mutual exchange of information, both by the city and by Power Transitions, in order to allow the city to conduct due diligence during the negotiating period. Of course, whatever definitive agreement, if any, is reached at the end of the day, will come back to council for review and approval. And I would suggest that tonight this council consider appointing 2 of its members to a negotiating team to assist in the development of a definitive agreement in the future. The agreement has an express provision that there is no obligation on the part of the city or Power Transitions to enter into any definitive agreement. Each party retains total discretion to end the negotiations, successful or unsuccessful. The agreement has 2 attachments. The first is it has 4 attachments. The first is the aerial photographs showing the primary 6 acres on which the full build out of the BESS facility would be constructed, along with, as Councilmember Stefani, you mentioned earlier, an aerial in Annex 2 of the remainder of the property that Power Transitions would essentially like the right of first negotiation in the event that the city does not build the RV park or intends to use it for renewable energy generation or storage. And that would be fully at the city's discretion if that eventuality came into fruition in the future. Annex B is a preliminary calendar of the major milestones that would need to occur at full build out. And I would mention that if we're able to reach a definitive agreement, the agreement would take the form of either an option to purchase or an option to lease, depending on where we get in the future in negotiations. And built into the option period would be major milestones and conditions that Power Transitions would need to meet in order to exercise the option to lease or purchase in the future. So not only do we have this relatively short negotiating period, but once we sign a definitive agreement and we grant an option, there's going to be a longer period probably a year or more of milestones that will need to be met in order for the option to be exercised. And part of that is Power Transition's own feasibility um, of the project, the CALISO process, the RCEA offtake agreement, and some other things that make it economically viable for Power Transitions to both demo the site and develop the site for their use. Annex C is really a conceptual guide to help aid in the negotiations. There are some conceptual things that are non-binding in Annex B that helps to set the table for the items that need to be negotiated and some concepts that have been discussed to date. All of this is up for negotiation as staff and council works with Power Transitions to see if a definitive agreement can be reached during this period. And I should say, if at the end of the exclusive negotiating period, that doesn't mean the city's foreclosed from continuing to negotiate. We just wouldn't be under any exclusivity to negotiate solely with Power Transitions. But the idea would be over the next 90 to 150 days, the parties can work together to see if we can present to the council at a later date with interim check-ins, the status of the negotiations, and hopefully a finished product. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question on page 4 under limitation of liability. It says here exceed an amount equal to the ERN payments. Can you tell me what ERN stands for?
That's the 15,000 exclusive negotiating fee.
So ERN stands for
Exclusive right to negotiate.
It's the exclusive right
right
to
to
negotiate.
negotiate. Okay, thank you.
So the two extensions that are written into this, potential extensions after 90 days, it looked to me when I read this that Power Transitions alone has power whether or not to extend, that the city does not have the right to decline to extend.
Correct.
So we just heard Jeff say that unless a purchase were part of this negotiation, that it really would not be financially feasible for them to clean the site. And I think that in the past, the city has not been particularly interested in selling properties. And so a big concern of mine at this point is it worth entering into this negotiating agreement if we're not at least seriously considering a sale? It might be a waste of energy on all parts if the city is not willing to sell. So I think that's a question that perhaps I don't know, obviously that question could be answered through the negotiating process, but it might be able to be answered before we were to enter into that. So anyway, that's something I'm kind of struggling with. Myself, I don't feel like we're in a position that we should be considering a sale at this time. I understand what Mandy said about this concept has been discussed for some time. I'm aware that RCEA spoke to the city about an MOU in excess of 2 years ago, and that we entered an MOU sometime in the last 18 months, I believe, to discuss this potential and to partner with RCEA on the possible development of a battery storage facility. But myself as a council member, even though I'm on the board of RCEA and I do understand probably more than some folks do about the whole process of energy procurement and generation and storage, I personally, as a Blue Lake City Council member, feel like we've just barely cracked the door open on this whole topic, and I'm not even remotely ready to step through that door. I have so much homework and so much learning and so much investigating to do from this side of that doorway before I'm willing to go through that door. So I feel like, we're here at the precipice of something really big, but I'm I'm not ready. I don't know if our community's ready for us to take that step. And so uh, I have to share that concern um, with the community and with the council and with Jeff. Um, I feel like this is happening. I mean, I get it when you think about things for years or months, you're talking to, to folks about it. Um, it seems like we've been, for some people, like for Mandy, you probably feel like you've been working on this a long time. I don't feel like I've been working on it for a long time. I feel like I'm just barely beginning to get acquainted with the concept. So, and there's just so much the world, this world is so big and there are so many possibilities and potentials that I feel like we really need to take our time and investigate those. Um, thank you.
Yeah, while I want the site cleaned up, it's always been my position that we lease our land and not sell it. During the time that I was not on the council, there was about a 6-year hiatus. And at that point, the council at that time sold some property to the B&B company. And I've always felt that that was a little short-sighted. I would like to see land leased as much as I'd like to have the site cleaned. I don't want to give up our land, and we still have zoning, but we lose a lot when we give it up. And my vision for that property was for an RV park and a multi-use area. So this kind of takes that vision to another spot, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. There'll probably be a new council in a few, weeks here that'll make decisions on their own, but it's always been my position that it's best to just lease the land and not sell it.
And could I ask one more question? If we were to sell, we would have to declare it surplus land, would we not?
No, because there's a couple of reasons why. One is the zoning, being zoned industrial, it wouldn't be suitable for open space, low income housing, or schools. But the other reason is we would have to declare it unnecessary for the city's own use. And given the resiliency that we get from the power, I don't think the council would be in a position or want to be in a position to make that finding. And so I don't, it's my opinion that we don't need to give notice under the Surplus Lands Act to HCD for low income housing or open space, that it's necessary. It's continuing to be necessary for the city's use despite a sale because of the benefits received from the development. But that's a decision that the council can make.
I mean, to be quite honest, I'm honestly not comfortable making a vote on anything because there will be a new council um uh sitting on December 10th, and I'm not going to be a part of that council. So it feels really awkward for me to um leave with this one massive kind of decision that is going to be put onto somebody else to manage, and that doesn't make me feel very, very confident in doing that.
I agree with Angela on that one. Whether or not you would agree with a lease or a sale, if we went through with the vote right now, the next people are the ones that are going to be making the decision on whether we would lease or sell. So our vote right now might just leave it up in the air for you, and we might want to push that back until after December.
I appreciate your wisdom on that. I really do. And so, in that vein, I would make a motion that we do not take an action on this exclusive negotiating agreement tonight, and that we put it off to December or January for the new council to consider.
So the new council gets voted in December 10th. Is that correct?
I thought we had decided December 17th, but it's
17th.
possible.
Sworn in or
Sworn in.
Sworn in.
Not
Well,
yet, sorry.
because they,
It could be either. I think
yeah,
yeah.
the election will be certified on December 3rd. So we will know definitely how it comes out.
And,
So
and then
it-
there's still the regular council meeting on the 24th.
yeah, but
Oh,
we're
that's
not.
we have a
See,
meeting
that's
in,
Christmas.
yeah, we have a meeting in
That's,
two, well, we have a meeting in 2 weeks.
we do.
And then there'll be the new council will get sworn in early December,
I
either the
thought-
10th or the 17th.
Yeah, I thought we had decided on the one meeting in on the 17th, but that's, that can be changed. Yeah, so we do have one more meeting at, well, Thanksgiving week, but it's the 26th.
And the process in December, excuse me, January, would we just go through this again, or having all the information that they provided to us, would we go with that? I mean, it's on the record. The new councilors, would they need to do the homework? Like, oh, yeah.
Well, all the new potential new council members, I think, are in this room. So they just heard the same.
So
It
there'd be
would
no
be
reason to have to.
it would be up to the council on
Yeah.
how they proceed if they want more time to learn some more and then make a decision, have another presentation maybe from Jeff. But I think it's up to them.
I mean, what we're doing tonight is continuing.
Right.
We're not shutting it down.
Right. We're continuing the discussion. We're not tabling it. Don't use that word, but we're continuing it so that, and it may be a good idea too, because from what we've learned this evening, those of us that are here can go out to the community and let people know what we've heard here and pros and cons. So there's a lot of factors there. So we do have a motion on the floor, which was to continue this
To probably January would be.
to the January meeting.
Yeah. So the new council can have a minute to get sworn in and get a little bit grounded before they start grappling with difficult questions.
And to be fair, I'm not against this idea at all. I think this would be a really kind of stellar shining star for Blue Lake in a lot of ways, but that's not my decision for another council to make. I don't feel like.
I don't think it's fair for us or the company to be making those decisions because if the new council doesn't agree with it at all, they could be hung out too.
Well, and there was a couple of reasons why we bought it tonight. One was the RCEA competitive solicitation process, where Power Transitions wanted to put itself in the best position possible when that solicitation is open to be in a position to highlight the benefit that it has having a agreement with the city of Blue Lake. That competitive solicitation was pushed back by so that and with responses due in early January. So that was the reason why we brought it tonight, was to get that process started, and so they could go out to solicitation further down the line with the city, than starting negotiations in January. So just for context, that's why it came tonight as opposed to December or January. And we did it special meeting only because Jeff is out of town, traveling for business at your next council meeting, and he wanted to be here present personally to present, which is the reason for the special meeting.
Yeah. Okay, we have a motion on the floor to continue this. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Motion made by Elise Scafani, seconded by Angela Shell to continue this item until the January meeting. Any further discussion? Thank you. And any discussion from public? Okay, I see a hand, so I'm going to go with Julie first, then Sherry, then Becky.
Thank you, council. I really commend all of you. Christopher, Elise, Adeline, Shoal, Chris. Like, you guys did a really good call tonight. I do approve this motion. And I have faith in anybody that's gonna step up into your shoes or remain your shoes. I have faith. I've always remained faith and I've always stayed diligent, sticking with you guys. And I don't ever mean to be a thorn in somebody's side, but I do believe in transparency, accountability, and just being decent human beings to each other. I think that's our priority. And I fully support your motion this evening, and I look forward to hear what other community members have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Sherry, Becky, and then Lori. Is that? Did you have your hand up? Okay. Okay, Lori, then I'm sorry. I couldn't tell whose hand was raised back there. We have a crowd this evening, which is a good thing.
So I'd like to say thank you to the presentation. It was very interesting and informative. Thank you to the council for listening and giving it thoughtful consideration and making the decision that you just made. One suggestion, when you, Mayor Jones mentioned people going out into the community and sort of, giving the information that we've heard tonight. I'm wondering if you couldn't organize a community uh, meeting. If Jeff is coming back and people have questions, um, sort of not to repeat the Danco situation that we had, just so that questions can get answered prior to an MOU, and more people have access to that. So that if maybe not this particular combination of council members, but maybe the next when they're sworn in, if there could be a discussion about offering that to the community as a whole, so everybody has the same information, everybody hears the same thing, and everybody's informed at the same time. Thank you.
Becky?
First, I wanted to say I did agree with Elise with what she was saying, and I want to thank all of you for doing the continuing on this because, and I want to agree with Lori. We do need the public, some kind of input for them. So please, can help us with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Kit Man?
I may be asking why we can't squeeze blood out of a turnip. Why isn't land gas doing the demolition and removal as required by their lease? Because we end up holding the bag essentially if we sell the land. I understand the need to do that, but we end up not getting lease payments. We only have property tax payments, and land gas was supposed to be doing this job, and somehow this is getting transferred to Blue Lake's responsibility.
Yeah, I can answer that generally. The demolition wasn't insured or bonded in any way under the lease agreement, so there's nobody at the end of the day that has a deep enough pocket to ensure that the obligations under the lease are complied with. What we have is a defunct, dissolved LLC that's owned by many other LLCs. It's the unfortunate situation that the city and many cities find themselves in with legacy development.
I mean, we could spend years, in litigation. I mean, we are known to have one of the longest running lawsuits in the state of California from the 50s. I was the one that had to sign a $600,000 check to the person because eventually we just lost. So the feeling is let's move onward and into the future.
Mayor Jones, I will say one of the first questions I asked Jeff is, would Power Transitions post a bond for demolition? He said, absolutely. That's what they do with most of their projects. So we would have bond at the end of the period that would pay for demolition if Power Transitions did not.
Interesting. Okay, Lynn, I'm trying to remember if you made a comment on this item, but you didn't. It was the last one.
I also want to thank the council for this really wise, mature decision, and particularly what Adeline said about the sale that happened to, I think I was like Stump Grinders. Who was it? Was it Rounds? Who was the property sold to? That is now owned by the B&B company. Anyway, so it was sold and then it was resold, and the city had no power over that. And the city now has a plan, or one plan, to go into a recreation focus, but we have a B&B in the middle of all that because we have no control over that property. And if there was a sale in this case, we'd be selling it to a corporation, I guess, located in Houston, oil and gas exploring facility that would have the power to decide what would happen to that property should they decide to sell or whatever happens in the future. And I think our experience has shown that selling has a lot of negatives, and I hope that that won't happen with this property. And thank you, Adeline, for saying that.
Any other questions or comments? We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Is there any council correspondence for tonight? Annalee, thank you. There's nothing on the consent agenda. Reports of council and staff. I will be attending the Humboldt Waste Management Authority meeting on Thursday. I will be attending the Humboldt County Association of Governments meeting on the following Thursday. Did you go to any meetings?
I
Chris?
somehow missed the email for the safety meeting and I wasn't there. I
Oh,
missed it. I'm sorry, guys.
Okay.
I attended the last part of the safety meeting and
What happened?
That's a good question.
I don't have the agenda.
Okay.
We talked about stuff. Yeah.
Sure you did.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was a good meeting.
And I also went to the Parks and Rec meeting and we talked a lot about stuff there. We talked about the holiday plans, the tree lighting and potential dinner, the horse story tour, and batted around a lot of great ideas on that. So hopefully there will be lots of fun things coming up in December. That's all I got.
Thank you. Angela, Shell?
We had a redeck meeting on October 28th and let me see. We had a really great presentation from the Humboldt Builders Exchange. That presentation was mainly really just kind of an introduction of what the Humboldt Builders Exchange is and kind of a bit of an eye opener to the difference between unionized construction versus non-unionized construction, particularly with some of the bigger projects that are potentially on the horizon and some of those out of the area companies that if they come in and they bring their unionized folks, it doesn't necessarily translate to hiring local labor, which some folks think that that's what's going to happen. And so there was a conversation about what that looks like to have outside contractors come in and bring their unionized labor work that doesn't necessarily translate to jobs, local jobs. And so there was it was a really interesting, enlightening conversation about that. Humboldt Builders Exchange also highlighted a lot of the work locally that they've done, some of the larger projects, which was really great, and some of their workforce training programs that they do. And then we just talked about the loan portfolio, which is very, very healthy. So Greg. And then Greg Foster, my apologies. And then last night we had our Blue Lake Chamber of Commerce meeting. And I think the big thing that we talked about, well, two big things. One, we talked about having our winter social. The chamber talked about having their winter social. And that looks like that is set for January 17th from 6 to 9. It'll be held at Prash Hall. Typically it's been held out at Corbell, but with it being January, probably not the stadium. So Prash Hall it is, and there was conversations about having it be more than just a mixer, but actually having activities such as potentially bingo and some other fun things too. So keep that on the horizon. Oh, and also having it be a chamber drive. And so having that be a component as well. And then the last big thing was the change of date for Annie and Mary Day. The date that it has historically been has kind of been a pickle for some folks whose kids are in rodeo and other things. So with Justin looking at the Humboldt calendar very extensively, it is the first Sunday in I'm sorry, in August is the date when there's literally nothing going on, with the exception of reggae, but kind of a different crowd. Um, so, so the Annie and Mary Day will be moved to the first Sunday in August, beginning 2025.
That was the traditional date for years and years. Then we worked with Del Arte and their festival. That's why we moved it to July. And since that's not happening, so we're back to the more traditional. Okay. Right.
Yes.
Yeah, that'll be a different date then. Yeah, theirs will still probably be in July. Thank you. Chris.
Just to the Economic Development Commission just a little while ago, I probably want to go through my notes, maybe see the agenda as well. So maybe I'll bump that to the next
Oh,
meeting, council.
okay. All right. Staff report, anything for this evening? Okay. And future agenda items, I really would like to set the December meeting, with people traveling and whatnot. I have here the December 17th at 6:30.
Right, we did talk about that, and then at the planning commission meeting, Gary kept saying that there was going to be a meeting on the 10th. So I wondered if he was misspoken or if there was some discussion about the 10th. Was there something? Okay.
All right.
So anyway, now it's been in the newspaper that the election results are going to be certified by the 3rd. So we are free to have our meeting on the 10th or the 17th.
I just would like to set it just because I feel like people are traveling and whatnot. I mean, maybe the 10th would be better because the 17th is closer to Christmas and people may be traveling. I don't know. I just think it would be nice to do that now rather than in 2 weeks.
I'm fine with the 10th.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good for 10.
All right. So we'll do it the 10th.
We're changing it to the 10th now?
Yeah, I guess we are.
Does that work for you?
Yeah, it's fine. I don't leave town. Okay.
You're here.
All right.
Sorry,
Any
that's
other
all me, isn't it?
any other future agenda items? Okay, we'll have our agenda meeting.
Right. I would like to have an item on the next agenda about security at the power plant and fortifying the fencing and creating a better secure situation given recent events.
Any other items for the agenda? Okay. And of course, we have a agenda meeting between Elise and I, which we meet the Wednesday
Next
before.
week.
Yeah, it's coming up. Okay, and so that leaves us to item 11.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion made by Elise Scafani, seconded by Christopher Edgar to adjourn. Any comment from public? There's a hand.
Public comment on your
Let's just take a vote. Can you take a vote?
new
All
agenda
right.
items for the public.
We're adjourned.